is that we really wanted at the beginning of this week to go from the high-end conversation of big constructs and to bring those constructs down so that we could disassemble our belief systems around the way things work, so that then we can diagram down even deeper and diagnose further down into our local culture as to what is it that's actually causing so much angst, chaos, fear, violence, and hurt, bottom line. And so the first day was about just orienting to the problem that we have, which is that we all realize that over the next 30, 60, 90 days, next 2 or 3 years, we've got serious stuff that we've got to deal with, because it's not getting less violent in our United States and in the world. It's actually been escalating. And so how do you de-escalate systems that are out of control? So our job was to pull us out of that, then give us some working tools to be able to understand how we could defrag, using computer language, or how we could de-escalate the situation to be able to go deeper and deeper and deeper, so we could create a place where we were at parity or at equality, so that we could actually begin to have the deeper conversations about loss and cultural wars and structural wars. And then how could we actually, working specifically in Bellingham, deal with the conflicts that we have with mass incarceration and the aggressive domination systems that are at work. This morning, the thing that was so extraordinary was finding a group of people who were willing to trust us enough to come in to talk and be recorded, and to be willing to talk from all these different elements. And so it required me moving into a different part of the building that we hoped that we would be able to have a nice group meeting and be able to record. And it was a little less than perfect. But the whole point of this was to be able to get ideas. And we have entire walls full of notes that I took from this process. And it showed us that there's certain language barriers we have between street culture, war culture, bureaucratic culture, et cetera, et cetera. So we started to notice that there were mythological barriers that we have to talk about. There's belief barriers that we have to talk about. There's cultural and structural barriers. And then there's just simple human relations barriers, and there's simple survival barriers. So being able to talk about predator versus prey, and notice that when you're living in a jungle, it really is a jungle when you're in a concrete city. And yet the instincts of being able to protect yourselves or protect others or feel vulnerable or whatever doesn't matter. That just because you gave housing first is actually a misnomer. We actually have to do safety first. We have to do dignity first. We have to do compassion first. There were a whole pile of phrases that we can use. So first came the myth busting. Second came behavioral changes that we could make. Then, across the wall down there, I've got it in that room where we actually have to do language bridges. Then we have to do potting up in systems bridges. And then we had to create barriers versus, things that were just misunderstandings. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff that will come out of this morning. So this afternoon, we've got 2 opportunities. One of them is I wanted to collect from you guys, what did you hear that was the same or different from the different parts of the country that you're in? And what were the things that you learned from the outside observing what was going on? And then gather these problems and challenges and misnomers or similarities. It's nice to know what you guys actually felt having observed this. And then later at the 3 o'clock time, I've got one guy that I've invited to come aboard, and I hope he can come. He's running a homeless and housing and programs for helping to deal with all these issues. He's from Seattle. So if he comes on, and if we have a few minutes to have him speak, I would like to invite him fairly soon when he comes aboard in case he has to go. But I'd really like to pull your ideas and thoughts out of your mind now. And then at the 3 o'clock time, we want to talk about what are resources and how can we mind map and what are the kinds of things that we could do, whether it's in Bellingham or in your city that could really help us make a difference. So that's a long preamble, but so whoever wants to talk, Mel, if you don't have food in your mouth anymore and you want to talk, I'd love to hear what you have to say, but if somebody else wants to speak before that, you're welcome.
Well,
Go
seems to
ahead, Kurt.
be chomping still. I'm not chomping at the bit, but I'll express what just came to me. The biggest issue that anybody has is changing the dream that we're in.
Ooh.
We're in this incredible dream in America and a lot in Canada too, where we have the incarceration demons, we have the punishment demons, we have the opposite of what the different scriptures of the world say.
Mm.
And yet all of these countries are talking about scriptures and this, that, and the other thing. So when we give people an example, like when I gave the program to these Swedish prison wardens and priests, people's excuse that it won't work here in America is because it's just Swedes there in Sweden, or same thing in Norway or whatever. Well, now they've got other people in, and they still have a 20% recidivism rate. We
Where
can
was this? Where was this?
in Sweden and in Norway. What's his name? Michael Moore did a program called
Yeah, yeah, okay. I thought you were talking about you did something like this, so I wanted to be
I
clear.
did a program in Sweden to the Swedish prison wardens and priests because their whole system is a national system. So I gave this workshop because I was teaching at Stockholm University at the time.
Okay.
I taught them a meditation practice to bring into the system so that people change inside while they're inside. I used to call meditation the cosmic drain cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
Roto-rooter is what we'd say in America. And when people get outside, they're different. They're mellower, they have introspection, they have inspiration, they have a lot different attitude toward life. So we're changing the dream while people are inside. There's an incredible book by Bo Lazoff. He started the Prison Ashram project with Brahmdas, and it's called We're All Doing Time. It's fantastic for even if you're not a prisoner, we're all doing time. So when we bring these kind of things, this information and things where it is applied in America or somewhere else, then people will have examples to play with. Like what you're doing. You're setting an example in Bellingham area to be able to make it so that it can spread around the country and around Canada. It's a beautiful, beautiful exhibition using, again, the mastermind circle idea. And incorporating the beauty is incorporating the homeless, the the what do we call them? People with diverse abilities. So when we incorporate them, the mastermind is enhanced even more.
I found myself mentally just going through my checklist of how do you have healthy systems? How do you have healthy and productive conversations? And what you've done is create a learning community of practice and life experience. And that's what we've built a lot of our life work on. That's what we've done in the religious community. That's what we did in creating some of the community coalitions and work that I did, how we moved to the national level with the Council of Churches and getting women and people of color involved in policy and practice. It's what we founded the Crossroads Ministry for Education and Organizing on. And I laugh because you literally outlined the frame of learning over time. So what you just said, that's one of the important things, is to capture what you just said about what you were doing with this process, so everybody can see it. People experienced it, and they were part of what they're doing is part of validating how much of that is real, or where nuances and twitches and tweaks need to happen. And that's the gift of something like this with this kind of group. And what it was also saying, what I've been wrestling with is what's the technology for our time? A lot of our work, we created transformation teams. We created intentional, we trained people how to make change. But a lot of that was face-to-face, expensive. But what it also brought was the real experience because people had to bring their whole selves. And you watch people grow and learn and teach each other and begin to build another level of trust for beginning to do the not yet. Part of what we're trying to do is to train people how to live into the not yet, not with fear, but with some sense of courage and hope, and grounded in the fact, not with the guarantee that whatever we're going to do is successful, but with the certainty that what we're doing now doesn't work. And so that at least it's worth trying some different things. It's worth bringing some different concepts. And because I think Rose and I, as a multiracial family and in a family of multiracial networks of all kinds of classes, well, we are a microcosm of this country. So our family has been for us a learning community for our life. And when I say that, so what we have to, if we're going to have a holistic change, we have to get all representatives into the process of shaping it and creating it. And part of that is, and this is what I'll talk about more, the tragic bargain, as we call it, of race and racism in the United States that shaped tragic investment. As Jim, I'm inviting Jim to join us if he can on Tuesday, the author of that. But anyway, but America is created for those, and you did it, but it's helping other people see the real frame of America and who it's intended to benefit, how it functions. And it's hard. Maslow's hierarchy says that folks who are trying to survive don't have a lot of energy to understand that or participate in that. And therefore, that's not where they can buy into the conversation. So we have to find ways for them to be able to move up other levels. And that's how do they survive in the reality of their world and be able to have a surplus of energy and capacity to be able to be in a different place in space. So there are multiple things that are going, I call it the four-dimensional understanding. They're all simultaneously happening, I used to say three-dimensional chess. I've now moved to the level that I think we're fourth dimensional because the wealthy and privileged of the world have become their own class and they exist for their own survival and well-being. And the rest of us are just players in the game. We're no longer function through nations, really. It's this kind of interconnection. So part of that is helping people see that, understand that, but not get bogged down by it. So I believe all this is coming through this conversation today. I was just seeing it bubble up in micro. And so I think part of that is we can help people understand it in micro in their own life. Then we can take it to, and it's the arc of change. Oppression just keeps redefining itself and reinventing itself so that the dominating culture still finds new ways of being the essence and frame of relationship. And so I think helping people see this at various places of understanding is part of what this opportunity, groups like this can help happen. So I said, Rose and I just started talking upstairs and we were sitting down and we've been working on some stuff. The other thing is the technology. How do you get everybody involved? And it may mean multiple technology approaches. One of the realities is that oppressed people often operate out of story and learning out of story and common sense. There's a big difference between common sense and intellectual sense. And part of that is most white people don't have good common sense. This is why they're dangerous when it comes to transformation and change. And what I've worked to do is to try and say, we've tried to create a way that within, I'm gonna use the United States particularly, in this framework of oppression of whiteness, to help whites have a way to have a new identity, a different identity. We have approached that of trying to talk about, there's a space called anti-racism, that those of us who are committed to that, and anti-oppression and multiculturalism, we're calling that's a space of the not yet. that some of us are stepping into and learning to create together. And the identity, that can reshape our identity. And that's the space that nurtures us and guides us. And that's what we can help people figure out how to do. And I think I used this language the other day, that within this country, all of us are imprisoned by a framework of white primacy that gets manifested in creation institutions and systems and structures of white supremacy. And until we understand that, and people can choose not to, for that to be the place they reside, and have skills and tools to help them be in different places, then we keep recycling. That's what as you've done so well, Joy. Why do these things keep repeating? The reasons, because we haven't had the breakout yet, or the new tools to help people get in different places. The gift also for me, and I'm sorry I wasn't there, I now wish I'd had the touching flesh experience of being in the room with the folks you brought in, because that's the other piece. You brought the theoretical, you brought the from around the wisdom from various places, intellectually, the kind of techniques, understandings, insights, models, but you also, it's all tested on the ground with real people's real lives and what they say is meaningful and what will help them figure out how to survive and be a different level of themselves. So, I mean, all that for me was happening in this week in terms of saying, and how do we help replicate that for other people to have that kind of experience in a holistic way?
And one of the things I appreciate about Mel is that he is able to process this and say all this and be immediately verbal with it. And he, of course, as you can tell, is the extrovert in our coupleness. So as an introvert, I need more processing time, and it takes me, and I am more verbal on paper than Mel is, but he does all his
I write in my head.
right then. And
So what's going to be,
that because I really want to know, I really want you to know that I am Rose. I love being married to Mel, but I don't like being referred to as his wife because then I feel like I'm an appendage and not myself. So after being Rose, Mel's wife, several times, it's like, I'm Rose, please. Thank you.
yeah, no problem. And I welcome your opinions and your written stuff, Rose. There's a lot of stuff that we wrote on those bulletin boards in the room, and we didn't have time to go back and encapsulate it after we closed the session. One of the things I did is I walked back over to the board and I said, here's a bundle of thought forms that came together. And here's another bundle of thought forms, and here's another bundle of thought forms. And so what they were able to see is that all of their talking had a result because we were listening, and they were able to notice what I heard and what was able to go up, because we talked about the fact that we've got language barriers. We talked about the multi-layers of gaps and the bridges, because what happened is I started to write down for them the mind mapping layers, and then the double speak and the triple speak. And I actually talked about the double bind, the triple bind,
Some of that.
there's a 5 bind problem, and there's all these things that happen. And then one of the guys at the end came out and he said, you know what, I've been researching this kind of stuff for years and years and years, and I want to do this and this and this. And he brought some other ideas forward. And then this young woman came forward and she said, and I don't know if this was on the recording, she would really love to help us learn how to do grant writing. And then we realized that as a collective, we could bring a whole body of these people together to work together to write grants for all of us. Because one of the problems you run into when you want to write grants and get money is they want to know what other nonprofits you're teaming up with. Because if you don't team up with other people, they won't give you any money.
And
But
if
if
you
you're
use their language, they won't give you money either.
That's right. So we talked about the language barriers. We talked about the class barriers, the job barriers, all these different multifaceted things. And then how all of this comes together, it becomes this big snarled up mess, and how by working together, we can break through those. And one of the guys that walked out, we were talking, he was a veteran, and he came in and he said, the one big thing we have to do is all the veterans in America know we're in deep shit. They know we're in problem. We've got problems,
Wow.
serious problems. And their automatic response is to fight and, buck up. But, and then I said, well, what if we got a whole group of the veterans together and we created a veterans community, like a small homeless, this community where the veterans were teaming together. And he said, oh, that would be so nice because the veterans know how to deal with the other guys that have CPTSD. They
right.
know how to deal with combat stress. They know how to live together. They know the rules of engagement. They know this. They don't have to be supervised.
That's right.
Right. And then he said, but the number one thing we've got to do, which is interesting, Mel, because I brought this up yesterday when we were talking about the issues of color are issues that when we have time to do the work around that, it's one thing, but when we're under a crunch where we have to simply come together at the heart, it isn't about that. It's the fact that we have to unify against a system of oppression, the colonialism that is dominating people. And we have to break out from underneath the domination and create entirely new structures. And I said, you know what is it that you guys know that we don't know?
That's correct. People
And
call
he said,
forever.
I don't know. And I said, well, what if we got all the veterans together and we said, how would you help us get out of this problem if it wasn't about violence, if it wasn't fighting against? What is it that you guys know that you had to learn to do together as a team to survive the war? Because you're still here. Like, what happened to happen? And then I said, because one of the big problems we have is that we have a huge number of veterans who went to war, and the whole story of the hero and the betrayals and the false hero and the false stuff, there's a whole bunch of hurt there. And man, he looked at me and he said, you know what? There really is. There's a lot of hurt here. And no one has asked me how we could put that work to use.
We did that in Charleston. We had a yellow ribbon commission group and came out of the Council of Church. There are models out there for most of these. That's one of the other crazy things. I don't know how in our lives, just we've been exposed to a lot of different things and places that bring people together. But the process, the issue, what I know is, and that's what I want you to hear, the process of helping people come together and be heard themselves, and then be able to work through both through the language and the emotion, and come to a space of new possibility collectively, is what comes through all the places. I've worked, you can't believe the number of kinds of groups I've worked with in my life in the places, but that's constant in terms of getting to the kind of change that can happen. But the framework of teaching, what we've been trying to do is to teach people what you're doing, what you're modeling, to teach people that this is a frame.
Yes.
They can then share. So one of the things I've been looking at is that the thing that makes this group potentially different is not just the prison situation, but looking at that, but teaching people how to do proactive, transformative change. The tool. When I worked with the University Associates way back in the 80s, I mean, one of the plans, I don't know how many, anybody remember Universalist University Associates? Or Pfeiffer and Jones. Does that ring any people?
What's his name? What's the name?
William Pfeiffer and shoot.
I can't remember.
John Jones. During the 60s and 70s, during the human development movement and time, they were two professors in Indiana University. And they said that there's a lot of stuff going on in the human potential movement and change stuff, but it's so scattered and it's not organized. So they said, we're gonna make a difference. We're gonna help this happen. They had platforms, of course, to reach out to people they knew were doing work and stuff like that. But they said there's no sense to it. There's no connection. There's no sharing and understanding. So they said, they opened a desk drawer, the top desk drawers each. They said, this is gonna be our information gathering center for the beginning of something. And so they wrote out to people and say, you've been doing work with helping people get better individual learn how to be better individuals, how to work better in groups and stuff. What's worked for you? Tell
Yeah.
us, send us your stories. They put them in those desk drawers. And then they started looking at those things and they began to say, so they published these little paperback kind of publications initially.
Little manuals.
Manuals. They called them manuals. And they were people's stories of what they were. They didn't have to pay a penny because at that time, people professional, I mean, these were professionals, they were community organizers, educators. What worked? What have you found that's worked? What have you found
That's,
that you can't figure it out? That's the question. And people just send them information. What they,
and that's,
And
And
they
I
did not
wanna-
copyright it.
and he, yeah, sorry.
They said, copy this, use it, spread it out.
yes, that's what we're trying to do here.
I
and
know that.
Yeah,
It works.
yeah, and that's what we'd like in the next hour or a couple of hours. I'd like every single one of you guys who have anything that you want to contribute to the whole. Number one, type it into the chat, but then let's talk and let's give other people another. Patty, I don't know you. You're new to the conference call, and at least to me, because I was not on the call, even though I was in the call earlier today. Patty, do you want to introduce yourself and share?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Patty Laughlin and I live in Mount Vernon, Washington,
Awesome.
doing street outreach to our homeless. My son is one of them. And right now he's dual diagnosis and right now he's in long-term care is what we're hoping at the new stabilization unit. And so in Cedar Woolley, and I became with Marcus D. And that's my connection. I found him connected to another local person that I've been doing the outreach on the street just on my own, really hot time in July. And then I noticed this Marcus D was connected to my friend. And so I was interested in what I was seeing him post on Facebook and mostly Facebook, I think. But anyway, it's been kind of a wild ride for me. I'm just newly retired. I was a school secretary here in Mount Vernon. And so I've been people helping for 23 years. And so while my son is safe and off the street, I've got room in my emotional life, you know, to try to be there and present for people that are out there like he often is.
Wow. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining in on the call, and feel free to introduce, raise your hand. There's a little raise your hand button down on the bottom.
Okay.
Down at the bottom of the screen, there's a little set of icons. They're called reactions. And if you hover over it, you'll find that you can raise your hand or just wave.
Okay.
I mean, I can see you wave. That's
Okay,
easy
great.
for me. Beth Brownfield, do you want to speak? Go ahead.
Sure. I'm a big advocate of person-to-person, people being with the people that they're talking about. It's not just a conversation that is had, but actually being in the same space. And I put two things on the chat. One was the Faithful Full Street Ministry located in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco, was started by a Unitarian Universalist minister friend of mine called Kay Jorgensen. And her sister was homeless and would disappear for, on and off, and finally forever, that she never knew what happened to her. But she started this, and just to read to you from it, they encourage and engage people from all walks of life in questioning assumptions and shattering myths about homelessness, poverty, and the boundaries of separation we all protect. We provide resources, internships, practicum, workshops, and artistic and cultural events for ministers, parishioners, and anyone interested in our vital justice-making community as it challenges both oppression and privilege. We seek to bear witness on the streets and in daily accompaniment and advocacy. Our community now extends from the barrios of Managua, Nicaragua, to many cities in the US. So they had street ministries. People would come and they would go onto the streets at nighttime and, participate in the ministry. It wasn't a religious ministry as far as converting anyone. It was just giving service and support. but it changed people's life. It was transforming for anyone who participated. So I put that information and also their website. The other thing is, when I was the director of religious education at a Unitarian society in Minneapolis, I developed a program called Journey to Community. And it was to take a certain community like African American or Native American and have a 3 or 4 part program. First was to invite them to come on a panel, and you could see the diversity, that not all Native Americans are the same. They come from different nations, they have different languages, they have different beliefs, but to hear from them what they wanted us to hear. So that was the first part.
Hold on. Can I ask that?
Yeah.
Did you cross-pollinate the different races, or you did
No.
a complete
Complete.
group just on all the
Yes.
diversity within the Black community?
Yeah, it was.
That I've not heard before. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we did Native American, African American, we did poverty, we did developmentally disabled. Those were some of the subjects that we chose, and it was a 3 or 4 part. So the first part was a panel, and there was a group that helped plan those 3 programs. And so there were resources, books to read, articles to read, things to watch, whatever, before they started. The second part was going into their community. If it was a powwow, if it was an African-American church, if it was a place where they develop, packaged food for people who use food banks, developmentally disabled, we went to nursing homes, and those were some of the things. And then the fourth part was to do some action, take some action within a group or individually that would ground what they had learned. So it was very transformed. We had teenagers and adults, and there were sometimes 40 people in a program. And for
Wow.
example, on the developmentally disabled dinner that we had, we gave each person, like they're blind, or they can't use their arms, or they don't have mobility or whatever. So we had to accommodate their neighbors sitting at the table with them, would maybe have to feed them or serve their plate or whatever it was. And some of us were blindfolded, some of us had our hands tied to our bodies so we couldn't move them. And so people went through the process too of briefly experiencing, that disability. So I just think education is very important, but it's often with instead of about.
And do you have that program still handy to you that you could
Yes.
share that with us and do
Yes.
it? Do you still have that outline?
It's printed. Mhm.
Incredible. That would be stunning. Yes, Patty.
Yes, I'm picking up the connection to the Unitarian Universalist tradition. And I come from Gladstone, Oregon, and was raised in the Unitarian Universalist, the Atkinson Memorial Church in Oregon City. So that's a surprise to me to hear that. Delightful.
So someone else, just so you know, Patty, that's where Mel and Rose and Beth have connected with each other here also.
Through,
And the Universalist Church here in Bellingham,
yes.
through
And I have,
Beth, has been one of our greatest supporters. In fact, they donated 25% of our entire budget, each one of the last couple of years. And it's incredible to have that support, because we never would have made it
Mel and
without that help. Huh?
ministers who have moved here.
I'm sorry?
Mel and I are retired UU ministers who have moved to Bellingham.
I'll be darned. Did
So-
you know Richard K. Bellingham? He was the minister for many years at Willamette Falls, or it was called Atkinson Memorial. He's probably been gone, I don't know, 10, 20 years now. Anyway, he was the minister who married me at the Congregational
All right.
Church.
So,
But just a quick word, ideally for me, congregations are the institutionalized love for a community. And so for me, if a congregation isn't operating out of love, then there's some kind of flaw in the way it's putting itself together.
Yes, and that's how
Yeah.
I've come to this place. I have no agenda. I'm not connected to anybody organizationally here other than I'm a new retiree and my son is safe right now. And it's been a
Wow.
long journey of 15 years.
Wow.
And so I can just get down literally on the pavement with him.
You know, what was most amazing today was that the older gentleman that was over in the corner, that was the white-haired fellow, he actually did bring his homeless son into that room who was sitting there, and he didn't speak that he
Mhm.
was there. And it was such a pleasure to be able to meet him and to see the passion and to see the genuineness from the people that were in that room. And they were willing to step outside of their fears, and they were willing to really speak
Mhm.
about the serious challenges that we're dealing with in Whatcom County. So does
Mhm.
someone else want to speak what you got out of this morning's conference call? I mean, if it's all the same stuff or different stuff or new ideas, whatever. Kasha, go ahead.
So I am going to step into the same pool, but from a little bit different direction. And I would like to speak to what I'm learning from some time, and also some knowledge is from the movies. And then one of the movies that shaped my mind was called Dope Sick. I think it's 8 episodes. It's available on Hulu if you guys have it.
How do you spell that?
Dopesick. This is the story about one of the most powerful and awful pain medication company that was creating Oxycontin.
Mhm.
And there is I really believe also, because I know some veterans, and I know most if not all of those veterans from like Vietnam or Afghanistan. They are not only traumatized by what they've seen, what they've done, what they had to do, but they are also dope sick from drugs that they were drugged by military to keep them alive, to keep them not sleep at night, to keep them survive in the middle of the forest in Vietnam. And those people are tragically damaged for life. And so if that damage is pushing people to go to the street because they are exchanging everything for pills, for drugs, because they got addicted because of serving in military, because they had accident and they got addicted to opioids because they were prescribed to them, and they were promised at the beginning that those pills, they will not get them addicted, but of course it was not the true because it was hidden. And that movie, that 8 episode movie, explains how this whole machine was working.
Wow.
So I was sitting, I mean, from the first episode to the last one, I mean, I knew from the news, from the information I'm following and learning, medical freedom stream, but that watching that movie just nailed me, to the wall.
Does anybody else want to share more feedback on what came out of today's meeting, and or what resources you want to add to the list? Because I think it's critically important. And Mel, one of the things that I would like you to do from your experience, and Rose from your also, and they can be 2 totally different lists if you want. I'd like to have a sense of all the different affiliations and associations that you would recommend that the public, I mean, it can be an educational reference list. It can be a direct referral list, whatever you want. But one of the things that we're going to be publishing in this report that we're sending out, and the reason we're doing these 5 days in the first place, is to actually sort of flood the community with resources and perspectives and different things, so that people cannot pretend that we're just, have a cute idea and we're really not worth anything. I want to put a long list of a compendium of resources at the back of this report. One of the things that I learned when I did the Fairhaven 1990 task force report back in the 80s. I absolutely changed Bellingham, and I changed the waterfront, and I changed Whatcom County became the southern terminus of the Alaska Marine Highway because I wrote up a report. We did a community development project and we wrote up these ideas. We did the research, we drew the maps for what we could have here. But then another fellow came along and he said, you know what, you guys have been doing all this work. I've been doing a whole bunch of information gathering and I got this whole compendium of resources and I don't know where to publish it and what to do with it. But it's a list of all the grants and it's these block grants and it's a list of this and it's a list of that. Would you like to have it and maybe add it to the report? I am so grateful because it took him a long time to write those resources up. But because I was able to print them on the back end of this other report, suddenly the people who came along who had an idea, who said, you know what, I like that idea, I'll go do this. They didn't then have to go spend hours and hours and hours researching whether it was even possible or who they talked to. They just flipped to the back of the report and found out who was connected. They made phone calls, they put it together, and Fairhaven changed. I mean, in a matter of 3 years, they changed block grant, they got block grants, they changed the beautification projects and building codes, and they did it themselves. The community did it. The county didn't do it. They didn't ask the city for anything. They just got together and they just did it because we gave them the resources so they could start doing it. And I mean, they put in a whole town square. They put in bathrooms, community bathrooms. One guy gave a grant permits to cross his property, an easement that took the trail from downtown Fairhaven to connect up to the boulevard. The other guy gave the grant over the Boulevard Park, the big, I forget the name of the street. It was a railroad bridge, and he gave that and turned that, he preserved the right, which is why we now have the boardwalk that runs clear out into the bay. Joel Douglas gave that. I mean, it was amazing. The donations and the participation came because people had access to resources. They didn't have to ask for permission. They just got resources. And when they got inspired, they went off and did it. And it changed Fairhaven forever. If you guys are in the Intentional Change Network on Noble Goldman, go in and watch the video called Flipping the Joy Switch. It's listed in there and it's free. You can also go to my joygilfillan.com website and you can find a link to it. I've got it in YouTube, but the good news is the back end of the video, I'm not just advertising my video. The power is to go listen to the guy who owned Paper Dreams and Village Books, give a testimonial for what happened, why it happened, and how come so much changed. And he said it was simply because we got together, we created a vision, and somehow magically this whole thing, but it's a true testimonial, you know, from the guy who created the bookstore down there. I don't know, Beth, why I'm forgetting his name, but you know who I'm talking about.
Chuck Robinson.
Chuck Robinson. Yeah, he speaks in the back end of the film about why collective intention, emotional empowerment works and how it changed the history of Fairhaven and turned it from a dying historical building in system into an urban village. And that's because we got a group of people together and we had it. We did it. So that's what we're doing here. It's the same thing, just different.